The evolution of technology and creativity in Nigeria has been shaped by a series of policies designed to guide innovation, improve accessibility, and support growth in the economy. Policies such as the National Digital Economy Policy and Strategy have played a pivotal role in advancing Nigeria's digital transformation since its launch in 2019. One key outcome of this policy is the significant rise in internet penetration. In addition, the Startup Act has been a breakthrough policy for Nigeria's startup ecosystem, creating a more enabling environment for tech entrepreneurs to thrive. The creative economy is a powerful economic driver that has reshaped global industries, contributing over $2.25 trillion to the global economy and accounting for 30 million jobs worldwide. Our film industry in Nigeria currently ranks as the second largest globally. The potential is immense for our music, our film, fashion, and art industries, making it crucial for gaps to be filled in areas like infrastructure and intellectual property protection. Today, we will explore the evolving worlds of technology and creativity, examining how policies in these sectors are important in shaping and advancing the economy. Welcome to the Leading Woman Show Policy Series, brought to you by the National Endowment for Democracy and Luminate. I'm your host, Abosede Jojagan, and today we will discuss innovation in policy, technology, and the creative economy with our guests. Our first guest is Jane Egerton Idehe. She is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Communications Satellite Limited. She's also an author with over 17 years of leadership experience in telecommunication. Her organization, Women and Careers, focuses on supporting women seeking careers in STEM. Our next guest is Aisha Orgi, the Director General of the Center for Black and African Art and Civilization, where she drives arts and cultural advancements in Africa as a creative artist and communication strategist. She's also the founder of the Center for Art and Creative Talent. And finally, we have Oswald Gobadia, a digital evangelist and business transformation expert with nearly 3 decades of experience driving innovation and growth across multiple sectors. He specializes in strategic partnerships and shaping Africa's digital and policy landscape. Let's dive into this conversation. So Jane, Oswald, and Aisha, welcome. Really exciting to have you on this episode of the show. So today we're talking about innovation in policy with a focus on technology and the creative economy. And where do we want to start? So let's start from what is the current landscape in terms of the policy landscape when it comes to technology and the creative economy. Let's start with you, Jane.
So if I'll look at it from the global perspective. I also look at it from the Nigerian perspective. I know one of the greater things we're seeing in the creative economy is the fact that technology has been enabling a lot. And if you look at what is really driving some of the policy changes or where the challenges have been, especially in our market, because our market has really been a driving force. We know that the creative economy for Nigeria, I think, delivers about 2 digits, 2.3% of our GDP approximately. It employs about, 4 million people. It's actually a thriving industry. And for various reasons. One, the youthful population, about 60% of the Nigerian populations are youth. Technology, access to internet, smartphones, social media engagement. So that large population, it creates a whole enabler for it. But we know that some of the challenges that are being faced, especially when it comes to policy, is the evolving nature of tech that is also being an enabler. So I think for us, it's quite common that piracy is known. Ever since the Nollywood industry started, I think one of the biggest gaps has been piracy. Since the days of living in bondage in the early 90s, isn't it? It's been a lot of, the issue had been piracy with the CDs, and we evolved with tech. Still piracy. Also, intellectual property is also a thing. So if we look at policy, I think the aim is for policy to create a framework to reduce these gaps or to bridge them.
Right.
Whether we can take them away 100%, that will be almost like being overly optimistic. But I think it's to address it so that we can enforce it and enable the ecosystem. I think that's what's important.
Fantastic. Oswald, let me come to you. What are some of the policies? And I welcome you to talk about the Nigeria Startup Act, of course. But what are some of those policies? And if you can even use that as a case study that can stimulate innovation and economic growth.
I mean, we have several policies that are attempting to do what they should do, or what they were created to do. One of the key problems we have is around implementation, interpretation of the policy. Creating the policy has not been the real difficult aspect in the country. Is more so how was it interpreted and how was it implemented, especially in transition of government. When we think about policies, one of my favorite policies is I call it the Play 2, Play 1, which happened in the early 2000s. And it basically said that, for every American music you play or any foreign music you play 2 Nigerian. And we can see that was actually the catalytic policy, once it was implemented, that led to what we see now when we talk about Afrobeats, right? Because, we went from listening to Jay-Z to now listening to Mr. Incredible. And that's what we heard every day on the radio. When you went to parties, you heard more of Nigerian music.
Right.
So that example just classically shows how policy can actually impact life. You mentioned the Nigeria Startup Act, which once again is a policy. And the intention of the Nigeria Startup Act is to also be catalytic in one of the largest. I mean, it's interesting I'm sitting between both tech and creative. It's hard to say tech is the largest. Tech is enabling, but when you step into the creative sector, then you know where the diversity of people and diversity of activities that happen there. So the policy is meant to help enable our youth create within technology. And interestingly enough, towards the end of the time that I spent in beautiful Abuja, we started to work on the exact same startup policy for the creative sector, right? And that's also meant to help enable the young people in the creative sector. So like my good sister here, Jenna, said, policy is meant to help enable. It's meant to drive. It's what pulls the things together.
Right.
You easily say, okay, we have young people. We say those numbers all the time.
Exactly.
Right? We have the problems that we need to solve. We say those a lot of times. What policy does is really connect the dots.
Got you. Fantastic. Aisha, what would you add to that? Feel free to spend time with the creative economy.
Because we're quite known for being creative. And I think that's really what's happening now. You cannot disconnect creativity with culture. So you have the digital, the creative sector, but then we also have the cultural sector.
Absolutely.
And now it's mostly almost always connected as the creative and cultural industries or creative and cultural sector.
Yes.
And what is happening now with the new ministry, for the first time we have a ministry that's purely focused on that. Tourism has just been added back into it. And you have the creative economy, the creative industry development policy, you have the IP policy being reviewed, you have the cultural policy being reviewed.
Right.
And the reason for all of this is you have some policies that have been even by decree from way back. And then you have those that from the early 2002s with reviews. So you can imagine the gap and the changes that have happened between then and now.
Yes.
Digital wasn't considered as much as it was then. So we now have to review all these policies to ensure that we're catching up with times. And catching up with times is a constant.
Yes.
Right? And policy implementation is quite hard. Things change very fast, but the policies can't change as fast as what is happening. So I think that's also another aspect that we need to look into, because if we can digitize the way these policies are formed and created, which is really happening now because we do a lot of meetings on Zoom.
Yes.
You know, because people are always busy, but you want to be able to review things together.
Yes.
And that's where digital also comes in supporting policy creation and hopefully implementation too.
Yes, and I just want to pick up on that. James, something I've heard before is oftentimes technology is moving faster than policy.
Yep.
So it's almost like government is playing catch up, right? And obviously, if you're playing catch up, you're not able to solve for what it is that you're trying to solve for. How can government bridge that gap?
So an interesting question, because we see that play out time and time again. You see with social media, we were all playing catch up. At the time, we were holding the social media entrepreneurs, and they were like, what do we do? You have to find the right policy. This is a new industry. And that's really what happens, because technology has the tendency to disrupt. And when you disrupt, the rules might not even apply.
Exactly.
Because we're creating new sectors or creating new rules.
Yes.
And most times, just like she said, policy is like a framework to protect. So it's not it doesn't react as quickly as we would love. While technology is moving at a faster pace. I think one of the great things you could do is awareness for policymakers is really important. The policymakers are equipped with the right tools to stay in tune with the times. I know we did that in the telco sector. When we will try to put out a new technology, one of the first things we will do will be to take policymakers to those rooms where we are discussing the technology. Because if they are exposed to it earlier enough, they start thinking about the right policies to help create an enabling environment for that technology. But if they don't know, they're just like everybody else. You are telling people to write policies for AI. They don't even know what AI is. What is AI, first of all? They have to understand what is AI, what's the impact, what is it trying to achieve, and what are the adverse effects. Then they can start thinking about, okay, we should consider policies when it comes to healthcare. How do we protect information? Or when it comes to writing self-driven cars, how do we ensure that data that is being shared? You know, all those things. So awareness is really important for policymakers. Equipping them with the right tools is also important. And right tools doesn't mean like digital tools. It could be putting them in the right room, exposure to the right environments where they can actually have access to tools they'll need to do their work. I don't want to say enforce it, because I think that would be way off. Because you first have to have a grip. So I think for me, a great way to start is awareness. Awareness is important.
Also, would you add anything to that? As somebody who's been, like, should I say, in the ring or in the field, are there any specific gaps that you've seen that if we sort of addressed would help to close, you know, this gap between technology and the rate at which policy addresses the challenges?
There's a lack of general collaboration. What people tend to say globally is that, you know, technology goes ahead of policy. And you heard that it's kind of like a tag phrase. It could be on T-shirts.
Yes,
right?
It could be.
But I think in a developing country like continent, actually, we need to look at a sort of different framework where, you know, they go side by side, right? It's sort of the only way to ensure. So in essence, you know, basically what Jane has said is that, you know, the knowledge exists in a certain sphere, and the people that need to do policy to guide that knowledge sit in a different sphere. If these two don't get together, right? So you can't expect the government people to be able to keep up with the technology when the technology is being cooked every per second. So that's why you need the collaborative nature, because what tends to happen is that technology disrupts, but the policymaker, which I no longer is one, and these are two policymakers here. I'm happily in the private sector now. You know, don't see disruption; they see displacement, as in something has changed. Right? The policymaker's job is to protect what exists. And that's the constant thing the policymaker does. Protect the people, I almost said users, protect the people, protect the economy. They're always protecting something. And that's what regulations do.
Yes.
Right? So if there's not a framework to encourage collaboration between private sector and public sector, you're always going to have that schism.
Right.
Where, you know, somebody's created something in Yaba, somebody in Abuja is saying, there's something not right. And then the next thing you know, there's a ban. And then everybody goes, ban. But it's a lack of a framework to ensure that these two parties continue to play together.
Collaborating. Aisha, let's talk about the creative economy and culture. I love that, as you said, they're beginning to connect, right? And talk about intellectual property.
Yeah.
Because how can all the value that we know can come out of the creative economy and from culture be translated to economic power?
Monetization.
Exactly. Yes.
Job creation.
Absolutely.
Also, as an artist myself, I have suffered, the loss of my intellectual property. At times that I was meant to make money, and people would use your work, which obviously you've invested time, you've invested money, you've invested energy to create something, and then you wake up and it's being used without your consent, and there's really nothing you can do about it. That's what a lot of people think, until they do a bit of research. Most times people realize we do have those intellectual property laws after the fact.
Right.
So I think one thing Jane mentioned about awareness. I think for most people, they need to also look at what policies affect them. I say this to a lot of young people, that you need to know what is happening around the sector that you want to be in. If you don't know these policies, you never know when it will hit you. You're running a business, you don't know what taxes and what other policies would affect you, and it changes tomorrow, everything can crash.
Yes.
So I think that level of awareness it's not just from the perspective of the policymakers, but also the people themselves.
Yes.
People need to do a bit of self research to know the sectors they're getting into and what policies could possibly affect them. Mainly because at the end of the day, it's not everyone in government that knows everything. So you have private sector individuals, which government is now doing, based on what Oswald said. We do have collaborations with private sector. For example, we have the NESG group working together with the ministry and other stakeholders to come up with the IP policies, the cultural policy, the creative policy. And when you see that interconnection, you get to see those that are directly affected by the policies and those who create them. And it's like, no, you can't do this because this happened to me.
Exactly.
And then you also have people who wake up and decide to submit a white paper. You never know what your white paper could do to policy creation. It can also be just one aspect of the policy that can change how it will be implemented, some words. So the legal side of things also, we need lawyers that are aware of what needs to be done and how language can also affect implementation and interpretation. So there's a lot that comes to, when it comes to creating policies. But I think one of the major factors is we do have the policies, they exist. Many of them just need to be updated. And if the people also who are affected by this get involved, then it makes it easier and faster for us to get things done.
Fantastic. Well, that's a good place to take a quick break, and we'll continue this conversation when we get back. Welcome back to the conversation. We're still talking about innovation in policy, technology, and the creative economy. I want to talk about innovation now, and feel free to take this anywhere. I mean, artificial intelligence is like the new buzzword or whatever it is. And also, I can see your face. So the emerging technologies, there's innovation on one side, there are problems on the other side. There's us as a nation who want to really, we want to drive economic growth. How do all these different things come together? Oswald, let me start with you.
I thought you would start with So, I mean, you framed it perfectly. It's emerging technology. There's the idea of digital transformation, which really speaks to an instance of change. The question I often ask countries when I ever sit with a country is, which digital transformation are you doing, right? Are you in a position to currently do AI, as in you have the infrastructure, or are you doing an instance of AI on basically borrowed platforms, right? Or have you built your infrastructure in your country to the point that you are now really doing AI, right? Paper doesn't do AI, right? So if you're still sitting in a country where you have not digitized your paper, you're still far behind. So what you will have is instances of AI to solve a problem, AI to solve something in health, AI to solve traffic, AI to solve design. But the countries that are moving with the AI as a nation's strategic position are also looking backwards into the infrastructure, right? Anybody who's a techie, as my sister here, Jane, who's a hardcore techie, hardcore, trust me, I've known her for a while, will tell you that technology is in the stack, right? You can't jump in tech. There's no leapfrogging in tech. So every time I hear somebody say leapfrog, I go, where are you jumping to? Elephants don't jump. You have to actually go through the steps, right? You can't do layer 3 if you haven't done layer 2. You can't do, higher session type stuff if you haven't built the application. So it's a step by step. So by the time you're going to do AI, there's a lot of things you're going to have in place. If you look into the world, they're talking about power. We're going to get power to drive these data centers. They're not talking about turning on old nuclear turbines and things like that. That is subsidy issue. That's just infrastructure to support the infrastructure that will ultimately support AI.
Yeah.
Right. So it's fantastic to have the ambition. It's fantastic to drive towards the ambition. But we shouldn't do it, without a active participation in the other infrastructure deficits that we have, which is exactly where we sit. We have an infrastructure deficit, which is part of, that's why you start, because she's actually trying to solve a big portion of the infrastructure deficit.
No, she'll tell us shortly.
Yeah, which is the communication aspect, right? That's the burden she carries now. So to solve that infrastructure deficit, the connectivity, which is just one small aspect.
Absolutely.
But like I said earlier, paper doesn't, paper does not do AI. You have to first get your paper into digits before. And in my time in government, I mean, my two friends here, I'll keep teasing you guys. They tell you how much paper they deal with, right?
Yeah.
The statement I often make, and it's become a joke to me personally, is the fact that, a few years ago, or a year or two ago, when we did the blockchain policy, it was approved on paper, right?
Blockchain policy.
Yeah, so such inconsistencies tell you where we are as a country. Blockchain, new, fancy, emerging tech, but the approval for it
was on paper.
Was printed on over 2,000 sheets of paper, and that's how the approval was done. So we have an inconsistency that paper does not do AI.
Fantastic. That statement is pregnant. Paper does not do AI. I got you. So Jane, give us the...
What does AI?
The full lowdown.
So I've been really thinking about how to frame it.
Yes. Since we're not techies, hardcore like you.
He has a basic point. I know one of the things I said earlier is the fact that technology has been an enabler. And in simple terms, if you look at the way we kicked off with access, internet access, I mean connectivity, it helped with how we, how the smartphone penetration went.
Absolutely.
And with smartphone penetration, digital content creation.
Yes.
And you see that thrive,
connection.
Social media, look at Nigerians. I know people that are raking up good money in terms of monetization.
Yes.
YouTube, Spotify, Nigerian content creators, Nigerian creatives.
Absolutely.
Really look at Netflix, Nigerian Netflix, you get it? So it shows that, technology can really be an enabler in that sense. But beyond an enabler, I think you have to solve the basic problem, because I'm thinking of it from different places. Access, which is what he's saying. If you really want it to be an enabler, you have to give people access. If there is no access, you can't even talk about AI. First of all, let them have internet connection.
Yes.
And the quality of the internet connection should be good.
Exactly.
And internet connection should be affordable. Because there are all kinds of issues you're dealing with. So I think that's one of the things my agency is trying to solve. Under the Federal Ministry of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy, we realize that we cannot choose, not all times you can use one type of access. Access needs to be solved in a complementary manner. So let me put that in context. It can't only be fiber or mobile connectivity. That's why my grandmother in my village doesn't have access. Because by the time the mobile operator checks there are 50 people in that village, why do we have to go and put
make
a
the
base
investment?
station? How much are we going to make? Then we want to lay fiber from away to your village. How much is it going to cost us for 50 people? How much do they pay me a month? So that's where satellite comes in. So that's what I deal with. So it's the fact that technology is complementary in nature, and most countries that have achieved it have layered it. And that's why I see someone like Starlink striving. Why? They said satellite was dead. No, satellite is cool. Because there's still a gap that has to be bridged. For a country like Nigeria, just by nature, you can't cover everywhere by fiber. It's too expensive. It would take too long.
Exactly.
So that complementary nature, that's access. But like he said, you stack it. If you do the access, so now you have connectivity, you have to build the other layers, isn't it? That's the middleware. That's the also infrastructure, be it the data centers, cloud solutions, all that has to come. Thank God because of the global nature of tech. So even though you don't build, you can access.
Exactly.
But there's something that is so important, which I also see trending, is the application layer. You should build your own application. Local content is important. It starts making sense when the gaming applications you're using are local.
Exactly.
They can even speak Yoruba, Igbo. You can game in those languages. That's how it's relevant to the audience. And that's what we learned. If it's not relevant to the audience, sometimes there's a whole disconnect. And that is when we take that powerful layer. We've done it in the Nollywood industry. We've done it in the music industry, Afrobeats. We should do it in gaming. And we're coming closer and closer into doing that. And I think that's where technology starts to, it's almost like loop the whole system. You create access for connectivity. You also use technology for distribution. So that's the whole YouTube streaming.
Yes.
We're using it to distribute the content. We use technology for creating content, the digital tools most of us use in filming, be it CAD or whatever software you're using. Digital tools, but we can take it to a level right on top, which is in policy making as well. We could use technology to help bridge some of these gaps you mentioned, be it piracy, be it intellectual property. There is digital rights management. I don't want to sound like a teacher now.
No, we're learning.
Because now I'm like sounding like a teacher. So there is, because he said hardcore tech, I'm like, I don't want to be a teacher. There's digital rights management, watermarking. We have even blockchain.
Yeah.
We can even use AI bots to actually track content, like she said, online. But the truth is that some of these things is almost like it's left for the public sector, isn't it? Everybody's expecting the government to do that because everybody expects the government to be the enforcer of the policy.
And almost take the lead when we had spoken earlier that, you know, they're playing catch up. Yeah.
But if the government, because now I'm the government, is playing catch up.
Just a reminder.
Now I'm telling myself, if we are playing catch up, maybe this is a good conversation to have, isn't it? It's a good reminder that maybe we need to step up because emerging technology is growing at a faster rate.
Absolutely.
It's a tool we can use, but we shouldn't be left behind, like you said. AI is not paper.
Paper is not AI.
So beyond
paper cannot do AI.
So beyond having these discussions that we actually put these things into action. How do we go back into the system and ensure that truly technology enables us, be it in policy, in providing access, or building that middleware?
Fantastic. All right, it's time for us to take another break, and when we return, we'll take some audience questions. Welcome back. So I was seeing some very curious people in the audience and would like to take questions from them. Any questions?
Hi, my name is Favor. It has been an enlightening conversation. I have a question. Young Nigerians are leaving the country for greener pastures. What policy would bring good enough opportunities for the Nigerians who are here, or even encourage those who have jackpot to come back?
Love that. So I'll let Jane and Aisha take that. Jane, let's start with you. Jane is like...
I'm just staring. I'm like, okay. Because, what do I say? Because I did read something earlier. I don't know who was saying something about, should the problem be that the people are jackpotting, or the problem is you should frame it in a way that you see it as an opportunity. Now, I'm not saying we want to let young people go. We definitely want to create an environment here that retains and nurtures talent so it can be productive. But it doesn't mean that you should stop talent if it's actually an export, because there are countries that actually export talent. They're known for exporting talent, and it can be a good thing. But of course, we want talent to be exported for the obvious reasons. You're excellent talent, you find great opportunities. Not that you're desperate, it's too hard, now you're running away. We don't want you. So I think the best way to frame that, I don't know if policy is the only thing, but we need to create an economy where talent is appreciated at home. It shouldn't be a case where you feel like I'm more appreciated out there, and that's why I want to go there. Because here, this guy for all this hard work will pay me 50K, and somebody there is going to pay me $100 per hour.
Is another
50K is
not, another K.
Exactly. So we want you to be remunerated for your value. That's the environment we want to create. I don't think it's only policy, because policy is like sometimes it's seen as policing. We don't want it to be policing. We don't want to say, no, nurses cannot travel. If you're a nurse, you stay back in country, doctors, why? It should be a case where she looks at the option and it's a greater option to stay at home. Not the case where she's forced by circumstances to leave and she doesn't see any reason to come back. So I would say the best way to do that is to make sure the economy itself is attractive, the environment, people find great value to use their talent at home, but not to entirely try and use policy to force people to stay.
I mean, please, let's take the other question. Absolutely.
Hello, my name is Moses. I really enjoyed the talk show. I have a question. Would you say the policies are keeping up with the fast growth of the tech and creative industry?
Oswald, do you want to speak to that? I think we already kind of mentioned it, but he's saying, are they going at the same rates?
So I don't know if it's a issue of rates as opposed to an issue of understanding, right? There are several policies that exist that sit on shelves and they're getting dusty that may be able to get your business started. But as was already said here, and I was very happy that it was, and not said by me, is that, you know, the beneficiaries need to start looking at what the policies that guide the business that they're interested in. You know, Aisha said it a few minutes ago. You know, if you're interested in doing a certain thing, what are the policies that actually guide that space? There's no industry globally that is not guided by policy. You know, policy actually creates the football pitch that you're about to play in. If they shift the walls in policy, it changes where you can play and what you can do, what you can't do.
That's right.
So it's important that you are friendly with the walls so you can help guide it to what's strategic about what you're trying to attempt to do. So if you are engaging the walls, you know, being policy, then it's not a thing about pace anymore. It's now a thing about how do we collaboratively engage to ensure the policy is driving my business, our business, towards the right direction. So it's not a pace thing. That's why earlier we said, you know, we shouldn't be looking at which is in front, policy or innovation. No, it should be policy and innovation together, right? Because of the state of development that we're in, right? We can't afford not to have it go at the same pace. So things should be changing together. And it can only happen when we continue to remain in the same room and continue to talk about it.
Fantastic.
I would like to add to what Oswald said, if that's okay, Moses, because I was just thinking as he was talking. You know, Oswald has said earlier about one thing is to really create the policy, another thing is really have it implemented. That's right. And sometimes it sits on shelf because we created it, but it's not implemented. But the truth is that you can hold us accountable. Yes. Do you know that? Because even though we write the policy and we don't implement it, you can make us implement it. You could bring it at the forefront. That's why it's important that you're aware. Don't stand on the sidelines. Like, how many of you here know that we do have a draft AI strategy policy out? Nobody. We've been calling for public opinion since August. Please Google it, you'll find it. They want your opinion. Read it. Tell us what you think. Because if you are aware, you can hold us accountable when we don't implement it. If it becomes a paper on shelf, that's when you say, what's going on here? We do have a policy. And I remember in the policy, you said this. How is it possible somebody is tweeting that he did create this and somebody used AI and did this and nobody's saying anything about it? So you hold us, we're giving you permission, hold us accountable. But you can only do that if you're aware of it.
Fantastic.
So awareness is important.
I love that.
And she means the government officials.
Okay, hold both of us, not Oswald. He's out of the question.
Oswald. Thank you for taking the time to answer those questions. Now, let's see what Nigerians out there have to say before we take closing remarks from our guests.
I've seen it on social media, but not a lot of publicity has been done around that, so I can't really say much about it.
Not directly, but I'm aware that the government is interested in the creative space and something like that, yeah.
I don't think so. Nigeria still has a lot to do when it comes to making right policies, especially for creatives. Like, I don't think so.
Except to benefit them in a massively exciting way that will hit their bottom line and make it make sense. Trust me, there is no policy that I can possibly do that will bring somebody from the US who's been working with Microsoft for a bit, right, and then to come to Nigeria. But it has to do with like a lot of introspection, talking with stakeholders and a bunch of that. So right now I might not be able to give that solution, but it requires a lot of thought process.
So I think it starts from our education. We are still a country that looks at white collar jobs as the ultimate, looking at jobs like medicine, engineering. But the world has evolved, and it feels like technology is moving at a really fast rate. And it feels like if we have policies that encourage people to go more in that direction, creating opportunities and actually seeing the value of what we do, like websites that can be built, products that can be made, solutions that can be done with tech in the country, I feel like people would know that there is a demand for it, and then yes, I think more can be done, like as a country, in that space here. I think platforms would actually be very helpful.
I doubt. Apparently, from what I have learned over the past few months, I think they need to do better. I think they actually need to keep up, and I think they also need to put themselves out there so that a whole lot more people know about these things, because a couple of people do not know these things. It's also sad for myself that I don't know these things, right? But I mean, so these things need to be known. They need to be put out there so that people can be, familiar with these things.
This has been such a wonderful conversation on today's episode. And to bring it to a close, I would love to hear your final thoughts. So Jane, let's start with you.
So final thoughts, I think one of the things that came out from this discussion is reframing how we see some of these topics. And I think traditionally we think policy, we think government, that's their problem. Innovation that maybe private sector come and help us innovate. But some of the things that have come out from our discussion today that it shouldn't be. Like, we are all in it together. And rather than having people sit on the sidelines, let's all be part of the solution. So if it's policy, we want citizens, we want people really involved, be aware of the policy so you can hold your government accountable. And if it's innovation, we don't expect innovation only to come from the private sector. We're not asking even the public sector to find ways to use technology, but to drive innovation. So for me, that's a real takeout for anybody listening to this. That I think the summary is that we're all in it together. No standing on the sidelines.
Yes, no standing on the sidelines. Oswald, what would you say? What are your final thoughts?
Such a rich conversation. I don't really know where to peg myself on the sort of a parting thoughts. But I would love to go back to that Jakba question because it's something that I've just been toying around my mind of recent. Jakba is something. The only problem with Jakba is we're not being intentional about it. And we are not trying to out-educate the pace. So the only problem with Jakba is that people who are critical leave, but you should have 10 of them, you should have 20 of them, you should have hundreds of them, right? So we need to if you talk about policy, there has to be more commitment around education. Other countries that have done very well with this really did education or very focused vocational education. If they are focused on nursing, then they are shipping out nurses. If they are focused on hotel staff, that's what they are doing. If it's doctors, if it's food, it's very focused. We have a country where you can't really focus on one thing because we're really a vast country. But we can really just go, these are the different areas. And that is somewhat is a policy drive. Because policy actually creates that structure that brings that intentionality around the fact that, okay, people are going to leave. It's okay. right? If you want to see a very clear example of what people living looks like, look at who leads tech in America now. All the top companies are led by people from one particular country who started a very specific school that trained for that very specific skill. They're now
shipped them,
taking over.
They're not taking over all the key companies, you know, as leadership in those companies in America or wherever. So it's about the intentionality and out training Jakba.
I like that. Aisha,
well, I think for me, we need to focus a little bit more on opportunities. We tend to be very negative-minded when we say, oh, we don't have this or we don't have that, but we don't see it as a canvas for what could happen, right? So you have countries around the world that already have infrastructure. These policies are forcing them to have to change what already exists. We have nothing in some of these spaces. And what that does is that it means you're starting at the top of where we are today. In whatever village it is you're coming from, you're not trying to fix already existing infrastructure, but you're creating brand new. So I think if we can start seeing that hope to understand that the opportunity ahead for Nigeria is so beautiful, whether it's regard to policy, whether it's with the innovation, the creativity, the technology, everything is new in a way. If 90% is new, I think that's what I would say. And if we can all realize that those opportunities exist and not just seeing things from outside. Like I keep saying, what is it around you on your street that you can fix? You'll be shocked. It can become your business the next day. Because if it's happening on your street, it's happening on others. So it's just as simple as that. Look around you. What are these opportunities? And then we continue to, you know, submit and contribute to the policies. I did a lot of that before I moved over to the other side, because it seems like we have a
movement
this person right here keeps denying us.
He was just there yesterday. Okay.
But yeah, we need to just realize we're all on the same street, where it's a two-way street, and you give, you take, you know, and it's the other way around too. So let's look at the opportunities.
Yes, people, government are the people. Fantastic. Exactly. Give them a round of applause. This has been such an interesting conversation, and we would like to say a big thank you to our guest, Jane Egerton Idehen, Aisha Ogi, and Oswald Govadia. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on today's episode. And of course, to our live audience, thank you for your participation. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media to share your thoughts on the episode using the hashtag on your screen. I'm your host, Abosede Jojagan. Remember, women's leadership can change everything, everywhere. See you next week.